There's a reason most grand plans never come to fruition. And the strangest thing is that the mistake lies in the first step, the moment you decide to talk about it. It's a cycle that repeats itself. We seek praise and, without realizing it, trade the joy of building something for the satisfaction of talking about it. But what you really want is to look back and see the finished work, to feel the pride of having done it, not the empty memory of a lively conversation. Because that's exactly the turning point that Alan Watts will teach you today, showing you how to use silence to transform plans into real achievements. Let's analyze this phenomenon not as a simple bad habit, but as a fundamental law of the human psyche. Think of every idea, every plan, every flash of inspiration as a finite amount of energy. It's a vital energy, a driving force that springs from the deepest part of your being. When an idea emerges, it's like a seed that has just received its first drop of water. It's alive, pulsating, full of immense potential, but also incredibly fragile. This initial energy, this enthusiasm, is the fuel you possess to cross the desert of hard work, doubt, and procrastination. It's the force that will get you out of bed in the morning, that will make you sacrifice hours of leisure, that will keep you focused when everything else tries to distract you. Now, what happens when you take this barely sprouted seed and immediately expose it to the blinding light of the outside world? What happens when you verbalize the plan? The act of speaking, of describing, of explaining is itself an act of energy expenditure. You are converting pure potential into sound. It's transforming the force that would move bricks into the vibration of air. It's a subtle but devastating psychological transaction. Alan Watts understood this not as a mystic, but as a keen observer of the nature of consciousness. He realized that experience and description of experience are two fundamentally different things. One is vivid, the other is an echo. When you tell your plans, you experience a diluted and premature version of the reward. Your brain, a biological machine that seeks efficiency, registers the praise, the validation, the simple act of being heard as a form of completion. It receives a small burst of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter associated with the reward of a task accomplished. And in that moment, the primal need to do the hard work to get the reward diminishes. You deceive yourself. You trade the banquet of achievement for the appetizer of approval. That's why the excitement fades. Energy doesn't evaporate into thin air. It's spent in an empty transaction. You sold your gold for copper coins. It's crucial to understand that this energy isn't just a poetic metaphor. It has an almost physical, biochemical component. Creative tension, the positive anxiety that precedes a great effort, keeps the body and mind in a state of productive alert. It's the same state as a predator before the pounce, focused, restrained, every muscle ready for action. Premature verbalization acts as a tranquilizer in this system. It relieves this necessary tension, signaling to the body that the danger of uncertainty and effort has passed, as social validation has been achieved. You no longer need to hunt for the result, because your tribe has already patted you on the back and called you a good hunter. The modern culture of public building and performative vulnerability often masks this trap. The idea is sold that sharing your journey creates accountability and connection, which may be true in the advanced stages of a project. But in the germinal phase, at conception, this exposure is like opening a greenhouse in the middle of a blizzard. The accountability that truly matters in the beginning isn't to others, but to yourself. It's the quiet integrity of doing what you set out to do, without witnesses. Imagine an archer preparing to shoot an arrow. All his strength is concentrated in the act of pulling the bowstring. The tension accumulated in his muscles, his held breath, his absolute focus on the target. All of this is potential energy. The harder he pulls, the greater the force that will be released. Silence and restraint are his greatest allies. Now, imagine if, in the middle of this process, he stopped to describe to a crowd how he will shoot the arrow, the trajectory it will take, the sound the target will make when hit. Every word spoken would be a release of that muscular tension. a shift in focus, a loss of accumulated strength. His shoulders would relax, the pressure on the string would lessen. The perfect alignment between body, mind, and target would be disrupted by the need to verbally perform. When he finally did shoot, the arrow would come out limp, without momentum, and fall to the ground a few meters away. This is an exact image of what we do with our goals. The planning phase, the nurturing of the idea, requires a silence similar to the tension of the bow. It is in this silence that the idea gains density, that its roots deepen, that energy accumulates to a critical level, ready for the explosion of action. Modern society, however, has taught us the exact opposite. It has trained us to believe that the value of an idea lies in its ability to be communicated, to generate engagement, to be socially validated. We have been conditioned to live out loud. We document every step. We broadcast every intention. We have transformed the sacred laboratory of our mind into a noisy public square. And we wonder why we feel so powerless, why our projects die on the shore, why the distance between intention and action seems like an unbridgeable chasm. The uncomfortable truth Watts points out to us is that, by seeking external validation, we are implicitly admitting that we do not trust the strength of our own conviction. We are outsourcing our faith. We are asking the world for permission to believe in ourselves. And the world, more often than not, is not qualified to grant that permission. Silence, in this context, is not an act of isolation, but an act of sovereignty. It's the silent declaration that your conviction is enough. It's the decision to be the sole guardian of the flame until it becomes a bonfire. The discipline of not speaking is not about hiding, it's about protecting. It's about understanding that certain things, like developing a photograph in a dark room, require darkness and containment to fully reveal themselves. Opening the door too soon doesn't speed up the process, it destroys the image forever. And so, the first great lesson about the power of silence is this: it is the vessel that holds the energy of creation. Without this vessel, the energy dissipates, and grand plans become nothing more than forgotten conversations. Let's delve deeper and observe how this mechanism operates in everyday life, almost invisibly. Think about the last time you decided to start a new project. Maybe it was a new exercise regimen, a plan to learn a language, a business idea, or even the decision to write a book. Remember that initial moment, the clarity of vision, the certainty of your ability, the vibrant energy coursing through your body. In that state, you were a force of nature. Now, what happened next? The almost irresistible urge is to share. You pick up your phone, find a friend, post on social media. That's it. Starting Monday, I'm going to run 5K every day. Or, I've got an app idea that will change everything. And what do you get in return? Compliments? Wow, that's amazing. What willpower? You can do it. And it feels good. It's undeniably pleasurable to be seen as disciplined, creative, ambitious. Your brain gets that dose of validation and feels good. The problem, as Alan Watts would point out with his piercing clarity, is that your mind doesn't accurately distinguish the joy of being recognized by intention, the joy of being recognized for the conquest. For your nervous system, the social reward has already been partially delivered. The effort-reward cycle has been short-circuited. The biological need to endure the discomfort of real effort to obtain validation has diminished dramatically. On Monday morning, when your alarm clock rings at 6 a.m. for your run, the bed is warm and the world outside is cold. The memory of Friday's praise is still fresh. The image of you as a runner has already been created and applauded. The urge to get up and really run toto-test something about itself has been neutralized. The impulse to act has been replaced by the satisfaction of having the identity of one who acts. This is the great paradox. By seeking support, we often kill motivation. This phenomenon can be seen as a form of social engineering of mediocrity. The structure of our digital social lives, in particular, is designed to reward declaration rather than action. It's much easier to post a photo of a productivity book with the caption "Time to focus" than to spend 4 hours in silence, away from the phone, actually working. The first action generates likes, comments, engagement, immediate rewards. The second generates progress, but in silence, without witnesses, without applause. We've been trained to choose the first option. We've become addicted to this cycle of premature validation. We become actors playing the role of ourselves. We create a public persona, the healthy me, the entrepreneurial me, the cultured me, and spend more time maintaining this facade than constructing the reality behind it. Watts's analysis goes even deeper. He would argue that this need for witnesses reveals a deep insecurity about the reality of our own experience. It's as if an event only became real after it was narrated. A trip only truly happened after the photos were posted. A goal only became serious after it was publicly announced. This creates a dangerous split in our consciousness. We stop being the protagonist of our lives and become the narrator. We're always one step outside the experience, observing it, thinking about how we'll describe it, and the person narrating the game is never the person playing. The consequence of this is a life lived on the surface, an existence in which the image of the thing becomes more important than the thing itself. The map becomes more valuable than the territory, and the end result is a chronic feeling of fraud, of emptiness. You feel like you're not living your own life, because, in fact, you're not. You're just broadcasting a documentary about it. To illustrate, imagine two individuals who decide to learn to play the guitar. The first, let's call him Marcos, buys a guitar, takes an artistic photo, posts it on Instagram, and announces, "New journey towards becoming a musician." He receives dozens of likes and encouraging comments. In the following days, he posts short videos of his clumsy fingers trying to form a chord, and with each post, he receives more validation. His focus subtly shifts from learning to play to documentary, the journey of learning to play. The second, named Daniel, buys a guitar and doesn't tell anyone. He keeps the instrument in his room and, every night, for an hour, practices in silence. He makes mistakes, gets frustrated. His fingers hurt. There's no one to applaud him. His only reward is the slightly cleaner sound of a chord the next day. 6 months later, Marcos still posts about his journey, but his progress is minimal. Most of his energy has gone into performance. At a gathering of friends, someone sees the guitar in the corner and asks Daniel to play. He, without fanfare, picks up the instrument and plays a complete song from start to finish. The impact on the room is one of amazement and genuine admiration. Daniel didn't need to speak. His skills spoke for him. He didn't trade substance for image. He cultivated the former in silence so that the latter emerged as a natural and undeniable consequence. Silence, in this context, is the radical cure for this disease of superficiality. Keeping a plan for yourself at the outset is an act of rebellion against this performance culture. It's saying, "This goal is for me. The validation that matters is mine, and it will only come when the work is done." It's a commitment to reality, not appearances. It's forcing your nervous system back into its natural cycle. Real, lasting pleasure can only come as a result of real, sustained effort. This requires immense inner strength because it goes against everything we've been conditioned to do. The initial silence will be uncomfortable. You'll feel the itch to tell, to seek that little hit of validation. But if you resist, something powerful happens. The energy that would otherwise be expended in speaking is forced inward. It builds, condenses, transforms into an internal pressure that has only one outlet: action. You no longer rush to live up to the image you've created. You rush because the pent-up energy needs to be released. You no longer write to prove yourself a writer. You run. You write because ideas, kept silent, are demanding to be born. Motivation ceases to be extrinsic, based on the approval of others, and becomes intrinsic, based on an internal need to create and achieve. And this is the only form of motivation that survives the first difficulty, the first failure, the long and lonely path to mastery. It's the difference between a flash in the pan, burning high and fast with the oxygen of other people's attention, and a deep ember, burning silently and steadily, capable of lasting through the longest night. Now, we need to delve into an even deeper and more dangerous layer of this phenomenon. The problem isn't just the loss of energy or the substitution of validation for action. What happens when you open the doors of your mind to the world is that you don't just speak, you also listen. And by listening, you invite the consciousness of others into your psychological space, a sanctuary that should be guarded with the utmost rigor. Each person you tell your plan to becomes, in effect, a voice inside your head. And these voices are rarely neutral. They come loaded with opinions, fears, projections, envy, and past experiences that are not yours. Think about it in practical terms. You share your idea of quitting your job to open a coffee shop. The first person, your father, projects his own fears of financial instability. But what about your security? It's too risky. The second, a successful friend in another field, offers advice based on the logic of his own field. The coffee market is saturated. You should consider technology. See, the third, perhaps with a hint of unconscious envy, sows doubt. Are you sure you know enough about management? None of these people, even with the best intentions, are seeing your dream. They are seeing the reflection of their own inner worlds in the mirror of your idea. The result? Your vision, once crystal clear, is now clouded, polluted by a cacophony of external voices. The pure intuition you felt, that silent knowing in your bones, is suffocated by a sea of other people's guesses. You started the conversation knowing what you wanted. You end the conversation without even knowing who you are. Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding the delicate relationship between the individual conscious and the vast ocean of the collective unconscious. He warned us that without strong psychological boundaries, we are susceptible to being inundated by archetypes, fears, and complexes that don't belong to us. By sharing indiscriminately, you weaken those boundaries. You become psychologically porous. It's like a house with all its doors and windows open in a storm. There's no point in later complaining that the floor is wet and the furniture is overturned. You've allowed the invasion. And what's even more subtle is how you internalize these voices. Your friend's doubt is no longer their doubt. It becomes your doubt. Your father's fear is no longer his fear. It settles in your heart as if it were your own. You begin to debate with these voices in your mind, trying to justify your idea to them even when they're not present. Your inner dialogue, which should be a space of clarity and empowerment, becomes a courtroom where your dream is constantly on trial, and the jurors are the ghosts of other people's opinions. This is where we need to talk about the Jungian shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves we repress, the traits we don't want to admit we possess. When people give you advice, they're often speaking from their shadow. The friend who tells you your dream is unrealistic may be projecting their own cowardice, the shadow of yourself that never had the courage to take a risk. The person who criticizes you for wanting to change careers may be expressing the dark envy of feeling trapped in their own life. Without the insight that silence provides, you absorb these dark projections as if they were objective truths, allowing other people's unresolved fears to dictate the course of your life. You become the dumping ground for other people's psychic garbage. Why does ancient wisdom, from all cultures, insist so much on the value of silence? Why did mystics, philosophers, and warriors practice verbal restraint? It wasn't out of mystery or elitism. It was out of a pragmatic understanding of the nature of the mind. They knew that clarity is a fragile state, one that needs to be cultivated in a controlled environment. They understood that conviction is like a young plant. Excessive exposure to the strong winds of other people's opinions can break it before it has a chance to develop a strong trunk. What would happen if you treated your nascent ideas with the same care a scientist treats a cell culture in a laboratory? You create a sterile environment. You control the temperature, the light, the humidity. You protect the sample from any external contamination, knowing that the smallest invading agent can destroy the entire experiment. Your most important ambitions deserve this same level of care. Silence is your laboratory. It's the sterile environment where your idea can grow according to its own nature, free from interference. There's also what might be called the tyranny of good intentions. Often, the most destructive advice comes from the people who love us most. They want to protect us from pain, failure, disappointment. But in doing so, they also protect us from growth, from risk, from life itself. Their love, when not accompanied by wisdom, can become a gilded cage. They offer us a safe map of a territory they know, unaware that our destiny may lie in a continent they've never dared to explore. Silence, in this case, is not an act of disrespect toward their love. It is an act of respect for their own destiny. But this raises an uncomfortable question. Why are we so afraid of this silence? Why is the need to share so compulsive? The answer often is that we don't trust our own ability to assess reality. We look to others for a mirror, hoping they will tell us who we are and what we should do. It is the manifestation of a psyche that has not yet matured to self-sufficiency. It is the child who runs to their parents with every drawing they make, needing to hear, "It's beautiful," for the drawing to have value. Psychological maturity, as Nietzsche might argue, is the ability to create your own values. It is the courage to be your own judge, your own evaluator. And this process of self-sufficiency is forged in silence, in the solitary confrontation with your own doubts and convictions. It is in this space that you learn to distinguish your voice from the voices of others. This is where you develop what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the belief that you are the master of your destiny, not a leaf in the wind of circumstances and opinions. Therefore, silence serves not only to protect the energy of the idea, but also to protect the integrity of the thinker. It is the shield that preserves your sanity and clarity in a world that seems determined to confuse and weaken us with its incessant noise. So far, we've focused on the dangers of speaking. But the true depth of this lesson, the essence of Alan Watts's thought, lies in understanding the immense constructive power that lies on the other side, the active power of silence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is not a vacuum. It is a substance. It is a field of pure potential, a space where real transformation occurs. Modern culture has taught us to fear silence. We fill it with music, podcasts, small talk, anything to avoid confronting what it contains. But wisdom traditions have always viewed silence differently, as the womb of creation. Consider the metaphor of the ancient alchemists, which so fascinated Carl Jung. They spoke of the sealed vessel as the most crucial element for the great work, the transformation of lead into gold. The work, they insisted, must take place in total containment. If the vessel were opened prematurely to check progress or show others, the pressure and heat necessary for transmutation would escape, and the process would fail. The material would remain forever in its raw state. This sealed vessel is a perfect metaphor for our psyche. Our projects, our character transformations, our spiritual growth. This is our great work. Silence is our vessel. By keeping a goal secret, by working on it in privacy, you are sealing the vessel. You are allowing psychological pressure to build. Frustration, doubt, excitement. All this emotional energy, instead of being dissipated in conversation, is contained and forced to become the fuel for the work. It is this inner heat that cooks the raw material of your idea, purifying it, strengthening it, transforming it from a mere concept, lead, into a manifest reality, gold. Consider nature, the greatest of all teachers. A seed makes no fuss about its plan to become a tree. It does not announce each stage of its underground growth. It works silently, in the darkness, absorbing nutrients, expanding its roots, accumulating the strength needed for the decisive moment when it will break the surface of the soil. All power is stored in stillness. The most important growth is invisible. Society, however, encourages us to be like a seed that constantly bursts from the earth to cry out, "Look at me, I'm growing." This act of constant self-exposure not only wastes precious energy, but also exposes the fragile seed to the elements before it is ready. Silence is the acceptance of this natural process. It is the trust that the work being done in the dark is the most important. It is the patience to wait for the right moment to reveal itself, not as a promise, but as a fait accompli. When the tree finally emerges, it does not need to explain its value. Its presence is the declaration itself. It's simply, and this is the kind of power that silence cultivates. A power that needs no propaganda, for its existence is self-evident. Silence, in this sense, is also a creative force. When the mind is quiet, free from the need to formulate explanations for others, it enters a deeper state of processing. It is in silence that the subconscious works, making unexpected connections, solving problems that conscious thought has failed to decipher. How often does the solution to a complex problem appear out of nowhere, during a shower, a quiet walk, or upon waking? This nothing is actually the space of silence you've given your mind so it can work uninterrupted. By constantly talking about a problem or an idea, you keep it at the surface level of the conscious mind, preventing it from delving into the deeper waters where true creativity resides. Silence is what allows this immersion. There's a fascinating paradox here. The less you talk about what you're doing, the more people feel the weight of what you do. Their actions, when finally revealed, have the impact of a surprise, of something that has emerged fully formed, as if by magic. This creates an aura of competence and mystery. Compare this to the person who announces every step of their project. When they finally deliver it, there is no impact. Everyone has already followed the process, already given their opinions, already tired of the story. The revelation is anticlimactic. The magician who reveals all their tricks before the show enchants no one. The power lies not only in the action, but in the timing and restraint of the revelation. So how do you begin practicing this discipline? Start small, choose a goal, a habit you want to build, and make a pact with yourself not to tell anyone about it for 30 days. Just do the work. If the goal is to read more, just read. Don't post pictures of the book. Don't talk about how reading is changing your life. Just sit and read. Feel the discomfort that arises, the urge to share, to take credit for the effort. Observe this urge like a scientist observes bacteria under a microscope. Don't judge it, just observe it. Visualize this impulse as a passing cloud in the sky of your consciousness. It arrives, it seems important, but if you don't hold on to it, it will disappear. In the first few days, the cloud will be a storm. The compulsion will be strong. But each time you let it pass without acting, you weaken the habit. You are reconditioning your brain. What you will discover is that by not feeding this need for validation, it begins to weaken. And in its place, something new begins to grow. The pleasure of the act itself. You begin to read for the sheer pleasure of reading, not for the reader identity it confers. The reward becomes internal. This is the beginning of true freedom. It's the moment you disconnect your self-esteem from the power of social approval and connect it to an internal, inexhaustible source of energy. You are learning to validate yourself. And a person who knows how to validate themselves doesn't need the noise of the world to know their worth. They carry it within themselves, in silence. And this silence, paradoxically, is the most eloquent thing they can communicate. Let's now examine the social consequences of living in a state of constant revelation. What happens to your identity and how others perceive you when your life becomes an open book? By oversharing, you become predictable. People learn your patterns, your weaknesses, your ambitions, your reactions. They categorize you, put you in a mental box. Oh, he's that guy who always starts a diet and gives up in 2 weeks. She's the one who always talks about starting a business but never does anything. Once this image is formed, it's incredibly difficult to break. Even if you change, people will continue to interact not with who you are in the present, but with the persona you created for them in the past. You become a prisoner of your own narrative. The freedom to reinvent yourself, to surprise, to evolve, is drastically reduced. You've handed the script of your life to others, and now they expect you to follow the role they were given. The paradox is that sharing, which is often motivated by the desire to connect, ends up creating a barrier to genuine connection. True connection happens in the present moment, between two authentic presences. But if the other person already knows your whole story, they stop seeing you. They interact with a file, a database of information they have about you. They're no longer curious, no longer open to discovering who you are. Today, and even worse, you start to believe this static version of yourself. By repeating the same stories, the same plans, the same excuses over and over, you start to think that's all you are. Your self-image becomes fossilized. In contrast, think of the people you've met who exude a natural authority, a gravitas, people whose words carry weight. If you observe closely, you'll notice they possess a quality of opacity. It's not that they're secretive or dishonest, it's that they have an economy of self-revelation. They don't feel the need to fill every silence with details of their lives. They own their inner world. And since they don't offer it cheaply, we, as observers, intuitively sense it must be valuable. Their words, when spoken, are impactful because they haven't been devalued by overuse. The silence that precedes them gives them power. This is a fundamental law of human perception. Scarcity breeds value. By making your inner world scarce, selective, you increase your perceived value. You teach others, and yourself, that access to your intimacy is a privilege, not a right. This isn't a game of manipulation, but a practice of self-respect. It's the recognition that your inner life is a treasure, and treasures aren't left lying around in the marketplace. Alan Watts would talk about the difference between the real me and the ego. The ego is the image we have of ourselves, constructed largely from social feedback. It's our public persona. The real me, or the self, is the totality of our being, much of which is unconscious and elusive. The compulsion to share is an ego activity. The ego constantly needs mirrors, validation, to feel real. It thrives on the gaze of others. And by living for the ego, we distance ourselves from our center, our self. Silence, on the other hand, is the path back to the self. In stillness, when there is no one to perform for, the ego begins to dissolve. And in that space, we can begin to hear a deeper voice, the voice of our own wholeness. Consider the concept of energetic debt. Every time you announce a plan, you create a kind of social contract, a debt with your listeners. Now, you're not just doing the work for yourself. You're doing it to prove to them that you're capable, to avoid looking bad. This external pressure, which seems like a motivator, is actually a burden. It adds a layer of performance anxiety that can paralyze creativity and genuine action. You become more concerned about what others will think if you fail than about the process itself. Working in silence absolves you of this debt. You owe no one anything. Your only responsibility is to your own integrity, to your vision. This freedom from other people's expectations is one of the most fertile environments for deep work and true innovation. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that by practicing restraint, you not only become more powerful in achieving your goals, you also become more interesting, more authentic, and more respected in your social interactions. People are naturally drawn to what they can't fully decipher. Depth is magnetic. A lake whose surface is calm and silent makes us wonder about the depths it hides. A noisy, shallow stream, on the other hand, reveals everything on the surface and invites no further exploration. By speaking less, you become the deep lake. You invite others to lean in and listen, rather than shouting to be heard over the crowd. People may even try to fish for information, prodding to find out what you're up to. Your calm, polite refusal to reveal everything will not be seen as arrogance, but as self-confidence. They will sense that you are operating from an internal center of gravity, not a need for external validation. And most importantly, you begin to relate to others from a place of wholeness, not neediness. You no longer need their approval to feel complete, so your interactions become more genuine. You can truly listen to others because you're no longer anxiously awaiting your turn to speak to prove your worth. You can share something meaningful when you choose to, and your words will have the impact of a pebble dropped into a silent well, creating ripples that spread, rather than being just another raindrop in a storm. The journey to reclaiming your power inevitably involves reclaiming your silence. It's learning to close your mouth so your soul can finally begin to speak. And when it speaks, it doesn't need to raise its voice. Your simple presence is enough. We arrive then at the crucial point. How can we live in this noisy, hyper-connected world without losing our soul? How can we apply this wisdom practically, without becoming an isolated hermit? The answer lies not in an absolute vow of silence, but in the development of a new skill: discernment. The discipline of silence is not about not speaking. It is about knowing when, what, and with whom speaking. It's the art of treating your words and your inner life with the preciousness they deserve. The first practical step is to create a conscious filter. Before sharing something important, a plan, a vulnerability, a great idea, pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself a brutally honest question. Why am I about to say this? Your motivation is key. Are you seeking validation because you don't trust yourself? Are you trying to impress the other person? Are you filling an uncomfortable silence? Or are you genuinely seeking wise advice from someone who has proven themselves worthy of your trust? Are you trying to create authentic intimacy with someone who has already demonstrated the ability to guard your treasures? If the answer is the first set of questions, practice silence. Contain the impulse. Keep it to yourself. Feel the discomfort and let it pass. This is your psychological muscle training. Each time you resist the urge to seek cheap validation, your self-respect muscle grows stronger. If the answer is the second, then share, but consciously and measuredly. Sharing with a trusted mentor or life partner who supports your actions, not just your words, doesn't dissipate energy. It can actually focus and strengthen it. But this sharing is rare. It's the exception, not the rule. For 99% of your interactions, silence is your most powerful ally. The second step is to redefine your relationship with progress. Society has taught us to celebrate intentions. We need to relearn to celebrate only completions. Create an internal reward system for yourself. When you complete an important milestone in your project, instead of rushing to tell someone, create a small celebratory ritual for yourself. It can be something simple: listening to a song you love, taking a walk in nature, drinking a specialty coffee. The goal is to train your brain to associate the reward with the those to do, and not to those of speaking. You are essentially building a new neural pathway, a path to self-sufficiency and intrinsic motivation. This will transform you from the inside out. The need for external applause will diminish to a distant whisper, because you will be too busy enjoying the music of your own achievement. You will discover a deep, quiet joy that the validation of 1,000 strangers could never offer. It is the serene joy of knowing that you are a person who keeps your word. And this, perhaps, is the highest form of integrity. Finally, embrace the idea of having a secret garden. A place in your mind and life that isn't for sale, that isn't social media content, that doesn't need to be explained or justified to anyone. It could be a hobby you pursue simply for the fun of it, without the intention of being good at it. It could be a collection of thoughts and dreams you never verbalize. How can you actively cultivate this garden? Start with the simple act of not sharing everything. When you read a book that impacts you, resist the urge to post about it. Let the book's wisdom marinate within you. When you have an incredibly good or bad day, try processing it alone first, perhaps writing in a journal no one will ever read, before turning it into a story for others. Learn the art of taking a walk without your phone, allowing your thoughts to roam freely without the need to capture or document the experience. This secret garden is the source of your sovereignty. It's the place where you can be fully you, without performance, without filters. It's your recharge point, your sanctuary, In a world that demands total transparency, having a secret garden is a revolutionary act. It's your declaration of independence. It's saying to the world, "This far you can come. The rest is mine." Alan Watts reminds us that we are not our stories. We are the silent space where these stories unfold. By cultivating silence, we are not emptying ourselves. On the contrary, we are becoming fuller, more present, more real. We are ceasing to be the echo to become the voice. We are ceasing to be the shadow to become the light. Compare the two paths that open before you. The first is the path of the broadcaster, of the one who lives out loud. It is a path that can bring quick validation and a sense of popularity. But its legacy is wide and shallow, like a river that spreads so wide it becomes a swamp. The second is the path of the silent creator. It is a more solitary and challenging path at first, but its legacy is deep and lasting. Like a well that, though narrow in opening, offers pure and life-giving water to those willing to seek it. The journey is simple, but not easy. It takes courage to remain silent when everyone around you is shouting. It takes confidence to follow your own inner compass when the world offers you 1,000 maps. But the prize is the most valuable thing a human being can possess: an intact soul. The power to look back and see the finished work, the pride in having accomplished it, and the wisdom to know that the most important things in life are not spoken. They are lived. If this message resonated with something deep within you, if it touched a truth you've always felt but never known how to name, then the first step on your journey of silence may be action. Enjoy this video, not as validation, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to begin. Comment below, even anonymously, sharing not a plan, but an insight you've had. And subscribe to the channel to continue this exploration, to remind yourself that in stillness lies the greatest power.